This week on Vaticano, Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI writes the preface to Cardinal Sarah's new book, The Power of Silence. We'll take you to an extraordinary archaeological site that reveals new facts about ancient Rome. And stay with us to discover more about the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. For this and more, Vaticano starts now. Noise is a deceptive, addictive, and false tranquilizer. The tragedy of our world is never better summed up than in the fury of senseless noise that stubbornly hates silence. With these words, Cardinal Sarah describes in his new book the need for silence in our contemporary society. The book, The Power of Silence, is the Cardinal's answer to the dictatorship of noise. By promoting silence, Sarah wants to help people live their relationship with God in a much deeper sense. During the presentation of the German edition of the book in the middle of June in Rome, His Eminence said that any encounter with God necessarily requires silence.
We think that we must talk, we must do something, we must act. But well, silence is an act of adoration. Silence is an act of greatness. So it's not doing something that you are efficient. The silence is very, very efficient. It gives you the opportunity to see yourself, to listen to yourself, and to listen to God. Yeah.
The presentation of the German edition of the book took place at the parish house of the Church of Santa Maria dell'Anima. Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI wrote a special preface for this edition. In it, he calls Cardinal Sarah a spiritual teacher and thanks Pope Francis for appointing such a spiritual teacher as head of the Congregation of Divine Liturgy.
I think that Pope Benedict is very interested in liturgy. And liturgy needs silence. So when I wrote the book, Pope Benedict read it, and he said that this book is a fountain of life for my spiritual life. So he asked me if he could write the preface.
Pope Benedict concluded his introduction by saying that with Cardinal Sarah, the liturgy is in good hands.
I think the liturgy is the future of the church. If we damage liturgy, we damage the church. It is a big fight, but we must do. We must fight.
The current pontiff has also expressed a lot of interest in this book about silence.
Well, I talked twice with Pope Francis, saying him that I am writing a book on silence. He said, wonderful, go ahead. Yes. And the second time, we talked again on my book when I was writing. And he said, I encourage you to continue. It will be good for the church. So Pope Francis is very, very delighted. And I gave him the Spanish version, and he's reading.
The Power of Silence is a challenging book. It invites the reader to return to the essence of the Christian life, which is the contemplation of silence and the adoration of the eternal God. Rome. The city was once the center of a great empire. As early as the 2nd century BC, the Roman Republic had stretched its boundaries over southern Europe and North Africa. and at its heyday, the empire ruled over the whole known ancient world. Hence the second name of Rome, Caput Mundi, which in Latin means the capital of the world. Ancient Rome brought the world a lot of scientific and cultural inventions. Perhaps among the most impressive are the building techniques and waterproof cement and concrete, Roman law, and an efficient road system. Rome also became a protagonist in the spreading of the gospel. Both St. Peter and St. Paul were martyred here. And after a period of persecution, Christianity finally flourished in Rome to then spread all over the world. We know a lot about Rome, but more still has to be discovered, due to the fact that Rome has always been inhabited and, as a consequence, has been in a state of constant rebuilding all through the centuries. It's difficult to say exactly what the city looked like at the time it was formed. The answer to this question lies not in Rome and above ground, but underground in the nearby sister city of Gabii. Gabii emerged on the southeastern side of a volcanic crater lake called Lacus Gabinus, about 15 miles southeast of Rome. The city vanished in the first millennium AD, and the lake was transformed into fields for agriculture. A few years ago, the University of Michigan became interested in discovering this ancient town.
So the project has been going on for about 10 years, thanks to an excavation permit that is granted by the Superintendenza Archeologica di Roma, and the permit is held by the Kelsey Museum of Archaeology at the University of Michigan. But there is also a wider collaboration with other universities, Yale University, University of Glasgow, Carleton University, University of Dallas, and these are all young professors that have decided to join forces with us and bring their own students. So we have about 45 undergraduates on site, which makes it one of the largest American excavations in the whole of the Mediterranean. And then about 20 graduate students all working together for a total of over 70 people on site on an average day.
Professor Nicola Terrenato knows the city better than anyone else. He's been working here since the very beginning of the excavations.
So Gabii was first occupied in the early Iron Age, what we call the early Iron Age, so in the 9th, 8th century BC, by very small groups of settlers that progressively merged together to form a city. And then the city acquired city walls and large public buildings. It kind of peaked in the 3rd and 2nd centuries BC, and then it started shrinking. Probably because of the competition of Rome, it became smaller, much smaller than it used to be.
Gabii continued to have a living and thriving community until the 9th to 10th centuries AD.
And we know that there was a thriving Christian community that had a bishop as early as the 5th century, which is kind of unusual for a community of this size. So this probably means that even if it was a small community, it was considered to be very important because of the glory that Gabii had in the past.
One of the goals of the excavations is to find out if Gabii had a bishop's residence and a cathedral. The existence of the cathedral is an open question, but the recent excavations have found a church dedicated to Saint Primitivo, an early Christian martyr. This tower used to be the bell tower for the church before being converted later on in the Middle Ages into a watchtower.
We chose Gabii for an excavation because, for a variety of reasons. This is a site that had not been excavated previously, so you had a whole city that you can investigate. But even more importantly, this is a site that really illustrates well the birth and the decline of the ancient city. We see here things that you cannot see in Rome because of all the later phases being on top.
These scholars and students are the pioneers of Gabii. Andrew Johnston from Yale University started working at this site as a graduate student, and today he is a professor and the leader of the trench excavations.
So in addition to the research questions that drive us here at the Gabii project, one of our priorities is training the next generation of North American archaeologists. And so to that end, we run a field school for usually between 40 and 50 undergraduates from all over North America.
A typical day at Gabii starts off with a small lecture.
All right, welcome everyone to the Area F building. So we've been here previously to talk a little bit about the reconstruction work and some of the rationale behind that. But now, finally, we're going to get around to talking about this really impressive monumental structure. I think it's a great opportunity to talk about this, especially on the heels of last night's lecture.
After the lecture and after each one has been assigned their daily tasks, the real archaeological adventure can start. Anna Gallone makes sure that all the students get hands-on experience in all the different stages and labs.
The Gabii project started almost 10 years ago, and every year we welcome, in average, about 40 undergraduate students who work with us for 5 weeks. So it's a program that allows students to have literally their hands dirty and to learn how to be a field archaeologist. But it's not just, when you think about field archaeology, you think generally just about like digging up dirt. But students here do actually have the possibility to participate to all of the different aspects of the field work, meaning that they spend equal time on the field, working in the trenches and in the various labs that we have here set up on site.
The process starts with removing dirt from a certain area. Then the area, such as the revealed parts of a building, has to be cleaned with a brush. And layer by layer, the disappeared city comes to light again. The dirt that's been removed goes through a process called sieving. In this stage, finds and artifacts are retrieved by hand. Usually they are fragments of clay, wood, and iron. Samples are carefully selected and sent for further cleaning and grading. The best examples fall into these hands for identification. If the sifted dirt has been taken from an area where archaeologists suppose that there were living quarters, then it goes through a further stage called flotation. Flotation is used to maximize the recovery of small items, such as seeds and small bones. Thanks to this technique, scientists can accurately say, among other things, what Gabitanians used to eat for dinner.
One of our goals is to train students in the wide range of methodologies and tools of modern archaeology, not just working here in the trenches, but also in various labs supervised by specialists in ceramics, osteology, zooarchaeology, environmental archaeology, to teach students about all of the kinds of evidence and data that we're hoping to collect as we excavate, not just exposing architecture like this, but looking for other kinds of evidence that can tell us about the wide range of activities that were taking place at this city in antiquity.
This is my second season at Gabii, and I've worked in Area C both times. I really love Gabii. It's an incredible site because of the opportunities that students have here to learn. We work in the finds lab, we work with archaeobotanists, and we also work with zooarchaeologists. And it's a really great opportunity to learn. People here are really willing to teach you.
The main discovery so far is this enormous structure dating back to the 4th to the 3rd century BC.
Just to orient you a little bit, and we're now standing on the middle terrace of a large complex that originally was designed on 3 terraces.
Whether this large stone block construction was a public or a private building hasn't been established yet, but its big size makes it the earliest example of Roman monumental architecture.
This is the stone that Gabii was famous for in antiquity. The lapis gabinus, the Gabii stone, was a high-quality volcanic tuffo that was quarried inside the city and initially outside the city. And beautiful buildings could be built, beautiful blocks. It was even used for the Forum of Augustus in Rome, and the city probably thrived on the trade of this kind of stone.
The connection between Gabii and Rome is the main reason for further archaeological investigations. The Gabii project wants to shed more light on the birth of the empire that laid the foundations of our modern civilization.
Hello, my name is Edward Penton. I'm the Rome correspondent for the National Catholic Register, and I'm here today with, for Vaticano program, to interview the head of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, Major Archbishop Sviatoslav Shevchuk. Your Beatitude, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
You have a very important position and a great responsibility guiding the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. Could you just tell us a little bit about yourself, first of all, and your background?
Well, I am one of the youngest leaders of the Eastern Catholic churches, and my duty is to serve the biggest Eastern Catholic Church, Church of the Byzantine tradition, based not only in Ukraine but worldwide. I grew up in the times of the Soviet Union, when our church was persecuted. My pleasure and specific honor was to know personally the confessors of the faith of our church, priests, nuns, and lay people who were imprisoned for many years because they proclaimed being members of that persecuted Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church on that Soviet times. Specifically because of this experience of the authentic church on that circumstances, I felt a call to be a priest. But I never imagined that God is so capable to transpond or help us go farther our limits, our imagination. I never imagined that I would be a priest who will be celebrate liturgies freely and openly. I never imagined that one day I'll go abroad. I'll never imagine that I'll be one day student in Rome. I'll never imagine that one day I would be appointed a bishop for the Ukrainians in Argentina. And definitely was outside of my comprehension the possibility that one day I'll become a head of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church.
Great. And that experience of persecution gives you perhaps an experience to share with persecuted Christians today, in the Middle East, for example, would you say?
Very often today in Ukraine, we remember those difficult times with some sort of nostalgia. Because when church is persecuted, church is strong. It is why I think the future of Christianity, the future of Christian faith today is having a new input, new insight in those parts of the world where the church is persecuted. on the history of our own church, we can testify that the blood of martyrs is indeed a semen Christianorum. And I think because of this courage and witness until death to Christ given by the persecuted church, we can be sure that church will be present in the tomorrow's world, in the world which is coming as a new culture, new globalized society. So in this part of the world, church is experiencing the mystery of the death, but also the resurrection of Christ.
For people who don't know about the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, could you explain a little bit about it and why a lot of people don't realize that there's more than perhaps in a Roman Catholic Church or more wider than that? Could you just give us an example, a detail about what the church is and how it fits into the universal church?
The very word Catholic means universal. Being Catholic doesn't mean to be a Roman Catholic or Catholic of Latin Rite tradition. There are 21 Eastern Catholic churches in the Catholic Communion. Particularly, Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church is a church with the long Christian tradition. The great schism between Rome and Constantinople was made 1054, so many years later of the baptism of Kiev Rus. So it is why our church for many years considered that schism like, you know, some fight between two important center of Christianity, but not as a division of the Church of Christ. And this memory of the unity of the Church in first millennium is our spiritual and historical heritage. It is why in 1596 our Church re-established communion with Holy See of Rome. And that Synod of Brest was a new moment, new period of the history of our church, Byzantine Rite local church in communion with Holy Father.
Recently, the Holy Father met in Havana the Patriarch of Moscow, Patriarch Kirill. The historical meeting was called a meeting of hope. In light of the declaration that was given then, how is the Ukrainian Catholic Church contributing to dialogue for the sake of unity between the Catholics and the Orthodox since that time?
Well, we are very happy that finally that encounter between successor of Peter and the Patriarch of Moscow happened. I think it was a historical event because not only Pope Francis, but especially his predecessors, Holy Pope John Paul II, Pope Benedict, always were expecting and were desiring such a meeting. It is why I think that it was a fulfilling of very deep expectations of many Catholics and Orthodox. But I think that the meeting cannot be an achievement, but an instrument, because in order to develop our common path toward Christian unity, we have to go forward in that pilgrimage together. This is the desire of Pope Francis. But I have to admit that the meeting of the Holy Father and Patriarch Kirill has to be applied in the local interfaith, interchurch relations. It is some sort of vocation for us. because there are such pains, such a prejudice in the level of the monks, nuns, parishes. We still bear in our memory the wounds of the history. It is why such a dialogue we need in order to heal our memory and to build the Christian unity. And Eastern Catholic Church always had a special mission to be a catalyst of the church unity. Our mission is to be some sort of prophets of the church unity, to be those who are calling upon the real, not only dialogue, not only declaration, but full and visible unity among the Christians, especially among the Catholics and Orthodox.
Your message. Thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching Vaticano. Join us next week for another edition.